The city, a sprawling bruise against the bruised twilight, unfurls beneath you. You stand by the window of your meager apartment, a glass of amber liquid cool in your palm. The silence, a heavy shroud. Dust motes dance in the last slivers of sun, catching the tired gleam in your eyes. This is your kingdom now. Chipped paint, forgotten files, and the ghost of a career that once gleamed. Marcus Thorne, a name whispered in disgraced circles, a specter haunting the precinct halls. The insistent thrum of your phone shatters the quiet, a jarring intrusion. You eye it, a sleek black rectangle vibrating on the worn pine of your coffee table, its screen a frantic pulse of light. It's an unknown number, yet something in the rhythm of its plea feels familiar, like a forgotten melody from a nightmare. You let it ring, the sound a dull ache behind your temples. You've had your turn at playing firefighter, and all it left you was ash. But the ringing persists, a relentless siren call. With a sigh that feels centuries old, you cross the room, your movements slow, deliberate, as if each step carries the weight of 1,000 unsolved crimes. You pick up the receiver. Thorne, your voice is a gravelly rasp, unused to conversation. Marcus, it's the captain. The voice on the other end is tight, strained, like a wire drawn too taut. Just urgency. We have another one. You need to see this. A tremor, subtle as a spider's silk, traces its way down your spine. Another one. The words themselves are a key, turning in a lock you thought you'd sealed shut forever. I'm out, Captain. Remember? This isn't just another one, Marcus. The captain's voice drops, a whisper that cuts through the static of your self-imposed exile. It's to that case. The glass slips from your fingers, a dull thud against the carpet, but you barely register it. The air in your lungs turns to lead. The words echo, a relentless drumbeat against the walls of your memory. The case that devoured your badge, your reputation, your very soul. You find yourself navigating the polished marble lobby, the air thick with the scent of money and expensive cleaning products. The elevator ride is a silent ascent, the numbers climbing, each floor a click closer to the precipice of your past. The penthouse boardroom is a cavern of muted tones and sharp angles. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a dizzying panorama of the urban sprawl, the city lights a scattered constellation below. Around the table, a cluster of faces, grim and weary. The captain, his face a roadmap of exhaustion, stands at the head, flanked by a lead detective, a woman whose sharp eyes dissect you the moment you enter. She wears her skepticism like a shield. Marcus, the captain nods, a gesture both weary and relieved. Glad you came. You ignore the other detective's appraising stare, your gaze sweeping the room. On the massive display screen dominating one wall, a series of images flicker. They are pristine, clinical, yet beneath the sterile presentation, a grotesque reality writhes. The first image, a wide shot of a lavish boardroom, eerily similar to the one you stand in, almost artfully arranged, lies in the center. His eyes are open, fixed on the unseen ceiling, a vacant stare. Just a profound, unsettling stillness. The second image zooms closer, revealing the details. The man is dressed in expensive, tailored clothes, undisturbed. His hands are placed, palms up, on either side of his body. On his chest, a single, perfectly formed white lily, its petals pristine. Your knuckles whiten as you grip the back of an empty chair. A memory you've tried to bury under years of solitude and cheap whiskey. Victim is Richard Sterling. The lead detective's voice, cool and professional, cuts through the sudden ringing in your ears. CEO of Sterling Financial. He was found this morning by his assistant. She gestures to the screen, where another image appears. A close-up of Sterling's face. A thin line, a faint incision circles his left temple, almost imperceptible against his pallid skin. No forced entry. Cause of death pending talks. But our preliminary guess is a fast-acting paralytic, possibly inhaled. Your eyes are riveted to the image of the lily, then to the stones. The captain watches you, his expression a mixture of apprehension and grim resolve. "Marcus," he says, his voice low. It's the exact same signature. Just like Elias Thorne. Elias Thorne, the ghost that led you down this path, the unsolved case that shattered your life. You point to a subtle detail on the screen, a faint, almost invisible scuff mark on the polished wood beneath one of the river stones. The placement is too perfect. He was brought here, arranged, after the fact. The killer didn't want to disturb the scene. The lead detective raises an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. You is saying the crime scene is staged? It's a presentation. You correct, your gaze still fixed on the screen. The details of the past and present merging into a horrifying tapestry. A message. The city lights outside the window blur into a single defiant roar. And this time, it's calling your name. The city lights outside the window blurred into streaks of molten gold and cold silver, reflecting in your eyes. A fire, long banked, now kindled within their depths. A desperate, chilling glow. "Marcus," the colleague's voice cut through the nascent fury, a low, urgent hum. "This isn't your jurisdiction anymore. And you know what happened last time." His hand, hesitant, reached for your arm, then dropped. He knew better than to touch the current you. You turned from the panoramic view of the city's sprawl, the gleaming towers now seeming like monuments to secrets, to the colleague's face. His brow was furrowed, etched with a concern that felt like a judgment. "Last time," you echoed, the words tasting like ash. "Last time, it was a ghost. This time, it's a blueprint." Your gaze swept over the pristine boardroom, the polished mahogany, the sterile screens. This isn't just a copycat, it's a continuation. A sharp digital chirp erupted from the conference phone on the table, a rude intrusion into the hushed tension. The colleague flinched, but you remained still, your focus absolute. He jabbed a button, putting the call on speaker. "We need eyes on this now." A clipped, authoritative voice boomed, static crackling at the edges. Another one. "And the scene? Are you there?" Your jaw tightened. The colleague glanced at you, his expression a plea for caution. But the words, "Northwood case," had already sealed your fate. That was your ghost. "I'm here," you stated, your voice low, steady, a counterpoint to the city's frantic pulse. "Send me the coordinates." There was a pause, a breath held across the line. "Thorne, you're not cleared for active duty," the voice retorted, laced with a familiar suspicion. "This is a live investigation. We have the lead detective on site. And I have 8 years of unfinished business with this particular tableau," you countered, your eyes locking onto the colleagues, daring him to intervene. "Send the coordinates, or I'll find it myself, and you'll have a civilian contaminating your scene." The threat was not idle. Another sigh, heavy with resignation. "Fine, but you keep your hands in your pockets, understand? The lead detective will be briefed." You merely nodded, already moving towards the door. The boardroom lights, once bright, now seemed to dim, receding behind you like an unwelcome memory. The drive was a blur of neon and rain-slicked asphalt. The city, a labyrinth of glass and steel, seemed to press in, its cacophony a dull roar against the rising tempest within your mind. Each street lamp that flashed past was a flicker of memory, a ghost of a detail from that other, older night. Floodlights, harsh and unforgiving, carved out a brutal stage from the gloom. A figure detached itself from a cluster of officers, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of authority. He was lean, with a sharp jawline and eyes that held the weary cynicism of too many late nights. He stopped, his gaze sweeping over you, a flicker of recognition, Then a hardening. Thorne, the lead detective stated, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. Didn't think they'd let you out to play. His eyes, the color of slate, held a dismissive glint. Heard you had a theory about this one. 8 years ago, sidelined. You met his gaze, unflinching. Theories are built on patterns, detective. And this pattern is repeating. You nodded towards the factory's entrance, the gaping maw of it. May I? He hesitated, then gestured with a curt flick of his wrist. Be my guest, and don't interfere with my team. The unspoken warning hung heavy in the air. The interior of the factory was a cavern of echoes. Dust motes danced in the harsh floodlight beams, illuminating discarded machinery. Skeletal looms draped in cobwebs. The air was thick with the metallic tang of old rust and something else. Something cloying and sweet, like overripe fruit and fear. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared upward. Around her, etched into the grime of the concrete floor, was a symbol. The sight was a punch to the gut, stealing the breath from your lungs. The details slammed into you, not as new information, but as a violent, unwelcome memory. The dust, thick and suffocating. The body, posed with the same cruel artistry. The symbol, a perfect blood-red spiral etched into the floorboards around her. The feeling of the killer watching, mocking. You is seeing things that aren't there. But they were there. The specific knot in the binding, the precise angle of the cuts, the media frenzy, the public outcry. The blank faces of your superiors, their patience wearing thin. The spiral burning into your retina, an endless mocking labyrinth. You felt a tremor run through you, a deep, visceral shudder. Your eyes, now wide and unfocused, still saw the new victim, but layered over her, superimposed, was the ghost of the old. It wasn't there 8 years ago. The line between past and present, between memory and reality, had never felt so terrifyingly thin. This wasn't just an echo. It was a direct address. The city lights, a glittering tapestry of ambition and anonymity, bled through the vast window of the penthouse boardroom. Their sterile gleam did little to warm the stark, polished surfaces, or the chill that clung to the air. You sat at the sprawling obsidian table, a single task lamp carving a harsh circle of light into the encroaching shadows. Around you, like unearthed relics, lay the physical remnants of a life derailed, banker boxes overflowing with the ember cases. Your fingers, calloused from disuse, traced the brittle edge of a faded crime scene photo. You remembered the exact angle of the head, the twist of the limb, the precise fall of fabric. The feather, still a phantom weight in your memory, was not visible here. You pulled a thick binder closer, its spine cracked, the paper inside yellowed. This was the original incident report, compiled when the first victim was discovered. Page after page, you scanned the familiar details. The meticulous ligature marks, the unsettling cleanliness of the scene, the lack of forced entry. Your eyes snagged on a witness statement, buried deep in the supplementary materials. A tangential note from an elderly resident living 2 blocks away. Dismissed as irrelevant at the time, a senile woman's fancy. Now, the iridescence of the feather from the new crime scene shimmered in your mind's eye. The chief investigator wants an update. Now. The voice on the other end, belonging to a former superior, was laced with a barely concealed disdain, a familiar sting. You as a civilian, remember? This isn't your jurisdiction anymore. I remember, you retorted, the words clipped. And I remember the ember cases. We is handling it. The superior's voice was a low growl, a warning. Stay out of the way. You will get the report when everyone else does. If you try to interfere, Marcus, I'll have you removed. Understand? The line went dead, leaving you with the dial tone's flat hum. a stark reminder of your isolated position. You slammed the phone down, the sound reverberating in the cavernous space. The encounter fueled a bitter resolve. You needed information, and you knew exactly who had it, even if they wouldn't give it willingly. You found another number in your contacts, one you hadn't dialed in years. Detective Reynolds, a gruff voice answered after several rings. It was the lead detective on the new case, a man who'd once been your junior, now your reluctant superior. Reynolds, it's Marcus. A pause, thick with resentment. Thorne, I heard you were sniffing around the scene. What do you want? The new victim. A specific ritualistic element beyond the obvious? You skipped the pleasantries, knowing they were wasted breath. That's classified, Thorne. You lost that privilege. The first case cost me everything, Reynolds. Don't you think I deserve to know if it's happening again? The plea was involuntary, a flicker of the man you once were. Deserve? Reynolds scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. You deserved the boot. You let a killer walk, Marcus. Don't pretend this is about justice. It's about your ego. He hung up, leaving you to stare at the phone, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over you. Your gaze drifted to a faded photograph tucked into a folder labeled Personal Effects. It showed a young woman, vibrant, smiling. You remembered her laugh, the casual kindness she'd shown you during an earlier, unrelated incident. Her death had been the spark, the initial ember. You flipped open your laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. One last shot. The retired forensic specialist. Him number was harder to find, buried deep in an old encrypted file. Hello? His voice was softer, weary with age, but still sharp. It's Marcus Thorne. I need your help. A long silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the building settling around you. Marcus, I thought you'd finally found peace. Peace is a luxury I can't afford right now, you admitted, the words raw. The new cases, they're like the old ones, the ember cases. Oh, Marcus, she sighed, a profound sadness in her tone. You never did let that go, did you? It ate you alive. Did we miss anything back then? A detail, a scrap, something insignificant that might mean everything now? You leaned forward, your knuckles white on the table's edge, your breath catching in your throat. Another pause. There was a lot of pressure, Marcus. To close it, to move on. They didn't like what you were finding, We filed it away as anomalous environmental contaminant. But you always insisted it meant something. A shiver traced its way down your spine. The residue. What kind of residue? Fine particulate. We never could identify it. Not just the killers, but something far more ancient, more insidious. The pieces were still scattered, but the framework, the terrifying outline was beginning to emerge. The old wounds were not just reopening. They were bleeding anew, connecting the past to a present you were determined to unravel. The city sprawled beneath you, a glittering tapestry woven with the threads of ambition and despair. From the penthouse boardroom, the world outside felt distant, muted, a silent film playing behind the triple-paned glass. Harsh white light spilled from recessed fixtures, illuminating the polished obsidian table where you sat, shoulders tight, jaw set. An emergency call had pulled you here, away from the quiet hum of your own solitude, into the stark, demanding glow of collective urgency. His voice, usually a booming resonance, was now a low, taut wire, strung thin by the weight of recent events. Another one, Marcus. The city is on edge. Your eyes, sharp and unforgiving, scanned the projected images. The new victim, laid out in a tableau of macabre artistry, mirrored the victims from your past. The familiar ritualistic arrangement, the precise incisions, the single, dark feather placed with chilling reverence. A cold tendril of recognition wrapped around your chest, tightening with each new slide. The lead investigator, a younger woman with an almost surgical precision in her delivery, pointed to a detail on the screen. And here, as with the previous two, the removal of the bea organ is exact. No struggle, no signs of forced entry, just gone. Her gaze met yours, a silent challenge in her weary blue eyes. She knew you saw the echo. Your mind, a labyrinth of old cases and forgotten details, began to construct the new narrative, layering it over the brittle parchment of the old. The official report scrolled by. Victim profile, time of death, initial forensic findings. Around it, the floor, illuminated by a crime scene photographer's unforgiving flash. Your gaze drifted, not to the obvious horror, but to the periphery. The polished hardwood, reflecting the harsh floodlights, showed a faint, almost invisible sheen. The lead investigator continued, her voice a monotonous hum of facts and failed hypotheses. We's looking at a cult, a copycat, or a resurgence. The MO is too specific. We had broadened our search for any groups with similar esoteric beliefs. But your attention was elsewhere, fixated on that subtle gleam. It wasn't the kind of dust that settled naturally in a high-rise apartment. Your memory, a flickering film reel, spun back. A late night, alone in the archives, poring over blown-up crime scene photos, searching for something, anything they'd missed. You remembered dismissing it then. A trick of the light, a photographic anomaly. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer around the first victim, too. You remembered the junior technician, fresh out of forensic school, mentioning it once. A casual observation. Looks like someone spilled glitter, almost, he'd joked, before being dismissed by a veteran who preferred tangible evidence. It was something organic, yet inorganic. A theory that spoke of more than just a cult, more than just human hands. It had hinted at a specific, rare geological phenomenon, linked to ancient buried veins of a unique mineral. A mineral known, in esoteric texts, for its absorbent properties, its ability to draw and hold a certain kind of energy. Not a byproduct of the killer, but a tool. Just typical urban particulate. She spoke with a hint of impatience, as if you were wasting precious time. No, you corrected, your gaze still fixed on the screen, on that almost invisible gleam. Not ambient dust. Did anyone look for that? The room fell silent, the colleague across from you exchanging a bewildered look with the lead investigator. Your past, dismissed and forgotten, was now staring them in the face, a ghost in the machine. The framework, once scattered, was beginning to solidify. The city, a sprawling tapestry of fractured light, bled into the boardroom's glass walls. You stood at its precipice, high above the frantic pulse of the streets. The silence within this area a stark counterpoint to the emergency call that had torn you from your own solitude. Harsh, unforgiving overhead lights rendered the expansive room in stark relief. Polished obsidian table, chrome chairs, and the faces of the lead investigator and a colleague, etched with a grim urgency. Their gazes, sharp and expectant, pinned you. On the massive display screen, the first images materialized. A wide shot of an alley, slick with a recent rain, walls weeping grime. Then, a closer angle, the figure on the ground a muted, almost abstract shape. Your breathing stuttered, a cold knot tightening in your chest. The lead investigator's voice, a low rumble, broke the sterile quiet. He was found within hours of each other. The first one, the colleague pointed, his finger tracing a line on the screen. A man in his late 20s. He was found in an abandoned warehouse. Similar positioning. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion, the frustration of a pattern they could not yet decipher. Your eyes, however, cut past the obvious. You ignored the blood, the twisted limbs, the general horror that paralyzed others. You remembered the desolate quiet of your own past scenes, the way a specific shadow fell, the precise angle of a hand. Your vision sharpened, tunneling through the noise. Both victims. The lead investigator hesitated, then obliged. The image pixelated slightly as it expanded, revealing the pale skin of the woman's throat. Not a wound, not a ligature mark, but something else. A faint, almost imperceptible etching. 3 delicate interlocking triangles, no larger than a thumbnail pressed into the skin just beneath the earlobe. Barely breaking the surface, a ritualistic brand, easily mistaken for a stray scratch in the chaos. Now the man, you urged, your finger tapping the screen, a silent drumbeat against the glass. The man's neck, grayer, rougher, but the mark was there too. Your memory, a vault long sealed, began to creak open, releasing a torrent of fragmented images. The tiny detail you dismissed as an aberration, a post-mortem indignity. This mark, you stated, your voice gaining a quiet power. It's present in my old case, back of her hand, just above the wrist bone. The colleague exchanged a stunned look with the lead investigator. It wasn't in the initial reports. We saw no such thing. Because it's subtle, you explained, your gaze fixed on the screen, a phantom pain in your own wrist. Almost invisible unless you're looking for it. A pressure mark, not a cut. Like it was branded, but without heat. You remembered the faint indentation, the way the light had to catch it just right. The way you dismissed it as a residual mark from a bracelet. A hasty struggle. A mistake that had cost you everything. It's a sigil, you continued, the word tasting like ash. Not a random act of violence. This isn't just a killer or a group. The lead investigator leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. You mean this is connected to something decades old? The positioning of the bodies, the almost devotional arrangement of the limbs. You articulated, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying inevitability. It's not just about the kill. The mark is the signature of the one who takes. The 3 interlocking triangles. It's a glyph. A very specific one, steeped in esoteric tradition. It speaks of cycles, of 3 becoming 1, of a hidden truth. Your mind raced, pulling from forgotten research, from the fringes of cult lore you'd once dismissed as madness. The symbol wasn't just a pattern, it was a key to a door you had unknowingly stood before for years, a door to something far more ancient and insidious than mere murder. And the ritual is repeating. We're not hunting a single killer anymore. We're hunting an inheritance. The room fell silent once more. The city lights outside twinkling like distant, indifferent stars. The framework, once scattered, was now terrifyingly solid. The city's pulse, a distant hum of indifferent life, vibrated faintly against the reinforced glass of the penthouse boardroom. The air in the room, usually crisp and sterile, felt heavy, charged with an unspoken dread that had settled since the emergency call. Then the screen on the vast conference table flared to life, a stark rectangle of cold light in the dim space. A colleague, his face etched with fatigue and a nascent fear, stared out at you. His voice, strained and clipped, sliced through the quiet. Marcus. Not in who, but where. He navigated through a satellite map, overlaying glowing red markers. The first, near the abandoned docks where ancient pilings still pierced the murky water. The second, deep within the old botanical gardens, among the gnarled roots of a century-old oak. The third, a quiet, almost forgotten cemetery on the city's forgotten eastern edge, a place of crumbling mausoleums and wind-whipped cypress. Individually, they're disparate, the colleague continued, his finger tracing a jagged line between the points. But together, an imperfect one, but undeniably deliberate. Just an old, overgrown municipal park. But the timing of the last 2 murders suggests a precise, almost astronomical alignment. Your eyes narrowed, a familiar current of recognition sparking through the fog of your mind. Not just a pattern, but a grid, the meticulous nature of the killings, the ritualistic elements you'd seen, the symbols carved, the specific disfigurements. They were all threads leading to this same unsettling loom. A faint echo of a long-forgotten lecture, an obscure historical text. Pull up the city's historical maps, you instructed, your voice low, commanding. Overlay them with these coordinates. Go back as far as records allow, and I need everything you can find on the local folklore surrounding those 3 sites. Any legends, any forgotten practices, anything about specific dates or celestial events linked to them? The screen flickered. Your colleague, accustomed to the sharp turns of your mind, began the work. The boardroom's stillness deepened, broken only by the soft click of keys and the almost imperceptible hum of the ventilation system. A place of forgotten picnics and children's laughter, now overlaid with the sinister geometry of death. Hours dissolved into the relentless pursuit. The colleague, a spectral presence on the screen, fed you information. You devoured it, sifting through digital archives, cross-referencing, piecing together fragments of a forgotten past. Old maps unfurled on the screen, tracing the city's growth like the rings of an ancient tree. The docks, once bustling with trade, were built over what was once a sacred fishing ground, reputedly blessed by the River Mother. The Botanical Gardens, a Victorian marvel, had been established on land rumored to be an ancient burial mound, a place where the earth itself was said to breathe with the spirits of the long dead. And the cemetery, you discovered, sat atop a geological fault line, a place where the very ground was prone to subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, believed by some Aboriginal tribes to be gateways to other realms. The old documents spoke of confluences, of offerings to the earth's hunger, of the turning of the wheel. They hinted at a cycle, a precise calendar of events tied to lunar phases and seasonal shifts. A faded, digitized page from a forgotten local history book, published in the early 20th century. It detailed a secretive, almost mythical local guild, known only as the Harvesters of the Silent Earth. Their practices were described as obscure, involving ritualistic sacrifices at specific nodes of power during times of astronomical significance. The purpose? To reap the essence of the living, to ensure the prosperity and eternal renewal of an unnamed powerful lineage. The text spoke of an ancient bloodline, chosen by the earth itself, who believed they held the keys to the city's fortunes, provided they paid the ancient tithe. The description of their rituals, though veiled in archaic language, resonated with the symbols and methods you had observed at the crime scenes. The River Mother from the docks, the breathing earth of the gardens, the gateways of the cemetery. They were not just folklore, but specific sites within a larger, terrifying design. The book mentioned a specific emblem, a 3-pointed star, its tips connected by a faint, almost invisible circle, often depicted above a stylized, inverted tree root. The framework was no longer just solid. It was ancient, reaching back through generations. You stared at the screen, at the confluence of history and horror. The emergency call had just unveiled a truth far more insidious than a simple murder spree. It was a continuation, a reawakening. And the ticking clock wasn't just about finding a killer. It was about stopping a harvest that had been centuries in the making. Your finger hovered, a shadow tracing the jagged coastline of an old map projected onto the sleek obsidian table. The coordinates from the last victim's hidden tattoo, cross-referenced with the cryptic symbols etched into the crime scene, had led you here. A secluded estate, ancient and sprawling, tucked away in the forgotten folds of the city's affluent periphery. A place of hushed wealth, where secrets could breed in manicured gardens. The air in the penthouse boardroom, usually sterile, now felt charged, thick with unspoken possibilities. Your colleague, hunched over the main console, paused his rapid keystrokes. Marcus, his voice usually calm, held a new, tight edge. "I'm getting an incoming priority alert from the He Chief's office." He wants to speak with you. Now. A cold tendril of recognition snaked through you. A man whose career trajectory was as opaque as the black glass of the city's tallest towers. A man who rarely deigned to address you directly, especially not since your own fall from grace. You straightened, the weight of the moment settling onto your shoulders. Put him through. You commanded, your voice steady, betraying none of the sudden tremor in your gut. The large display screen, moments ago a canvas for your illuminated map, dissolved into a static-laced image of a stern, unsmiling face. His office, a blur of muted tones and imposing mahogany, framed him like a declaration of power. Thorne? His voice. A low rumble filled the room, devoid of any pleasantry. I understand you've been pursuing certain unconventional avenues regarding the recent fatalities. You felt the first brush of ice. I'm investigating a series of ritualistic murders. Sir, the connections are undeniable. Your gaze did not waver, meeting his across the digital divide. Undeniable to you, he corrected, a faint, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. Our official assessment indicates these are isolated incidents, perhaps the work of a lone disturbed individual. The ritualistic aspect is a sensationalist interpretation. A snort escaped you, sharp and involuntary. Isolated? Sir, we have overlapping sigils, specific astronomical alignments, and a consistent M.O. This isn't a lone wolf, it's a pack, and they're well organized. Your hands clenched at your sides, the desire to pound the table a raw, immediate urge. Departure from the force. You are officially relieved of any further involvement in these current investigations, Thorne. Effective immediately. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute, like a guillotine blade. Your colleague behind you let out a soft, sharp intake of breath. Or because I'm getting too close to something you don't want exposed? The question, though rhetorical, was laced with venom. This wasn't about your past. It was about their present, their complicity. Any further attempts to interfere will be met with severe consequences. Consider this a direct order, Thorne. The boardroom, moments ago a strategic command center, now felt like a cage. You turned slowly, your eyes sweeping over the silent monitors, the inert console. Your colleague stared at the blank screen, his face a mask of disbelief and frustration. Marcus, he began, his voice hushed. He can't just... He can. You interrupted, the words clipped, and he just did. This isn't about procedure, not anymore. This wasn't merely obstruction, it was a declaration of war. Your gaze drifted back to the map, or rather where the map had been. The He Chief's abrupt intervention confirmed its significance, transforming a strong lead into undeniable proof of a deeper conspiracy. A slow, deliberate breath filled your lungs. Their game, played in the sterile light of official channels, was now moot. The tick of an unseen clock grew louder in your mind, a relentless rhythm pushing you forward. There was no turning back, no safe harbor. You looked at your colleague, a silent question passing between you. His eyes, though troubled, held a flicker of understanding, a grudging respect for the path you were about to carve. The lines between justice and vengeance, never truly distinct for you, now blurred into an indistinguishable, dangerous haze. And that was exactly how you needed to be. You would find the gatekeepers, and you would tear down their gates, brick by bloody brick. The penthouse boardroom, a glass eyrie suspended above the city's indifferent sprawl, hums with a brittle energy. Light, stark, and unforgiving, spills from the recessed panels, glinting off the polished mahogany and the anxious faces gathered around its vast expanse. You enter, your presence a ripple in the agitated air, carrying the weight of a certainty others have yet to grasp. They speak in clipped tones, their voices sharp edges against the low thrum of the city outside, discussing the latest nightmare. It's impossible, the director insists, his brow furrowed, fingers drumming a nervous staccato on the table. Another victim, in a location secured just hours ago, as if the very air swallowed him whole. You move to the empty seat, your gaze sweeping across the faces, lingering on the chief strategist. He sits at the head of the table, an island of calm amidst the storm, his silver hair immaculate, his posture unyielding. A figure of quiet authority, a mentor once, whose counsel you had often sought. The director continues, a tremor in his voice. The very place we deemed impenetrable after the last incident. A faint, almost imperceptible shift in the chief strategist's eyes. He clears his throat. A disturbing development, certainly. Perhaps an inside job. A rogue element exploiting our blind spots. We must double down on internal vetting. His voice, a low rumble, attempts to anchor the chaos, to steer the narrative towards a familiar, manageable threat. You observe the subtle tension in his jaw, the way his knuckles whiten ever so slightly as he rests his hands on the table. The words he chooses, the emphasis he places on internal vetting, echo with a calculated misdirection you've come to recognize. He is painting a picture, directing their gaze away from the true canvas. Blind spots, you echo, your voice cutting through the hum, or deliberate omissions. All eyes turn to you, a sudden silence descending, thick and expectant. You meet the chief strategist's gaze, unblinking. The air crackles. "Marcus," he says, his tone measured, a hint of steel beneath the velvet. "This is not the time for conjecture. We face a crisis." "A crisis of your making," you counter, the words a cold, precise blade. The impossible locations, the unseen entries, they are not random. The director dismissed them as esoteric graffiti. The analyst called them decorative flourishes. You pause, letting the memory settle. But you, chief strategist, were the one who insisted they held no discernible pattern, no intrinsic meaning. You ensured those details were buried deep in the preliminary reports, marked irrelevant. The chief strategist's face remains impassive, a mask carved from stone, but a subtle clenching of his jaw betrays him. Yet they are a pattern, you continue, your voice gaining power, an archaic form of geodetic notation, a system for precise geographical coordinates, hidden in plain sight, a language only a select few would understand. You project images onto the large screen embedded in the wall, a series of intricate symbols, then their corresponding geographical locations. The observatory flashes red. The junior investigator, you state, your voice flat, was not just a victim. At the precise location dictated by the next symbol in the sequence. You point to a new symbol now visible on the screen, intricate and unsettling. A symbol that was only recovered from the second crime scene, buried beneath a loose floorboard. A detail you personally oversaw the suppression of, chief strategist, citing contamination concerns. A collective gasp ripples through the room, and you guided us away from it every single time. You are the blind spot. The chief strategist finally moves, pushing back from the table. It cost you everything once. And you were always too quick to dismiss them, you retort, because you cast them. The junior investigator was investigating discrepancies in the very reports you authored, wasn't he? A trait that, in our line of work, can be unfortunate. The words hang in the air, a silken threat, a confession veiled in plausible deniability. This wasn't just a rogue agent. This was the architect, the protector, the very heart of the deceit. The inner circle wasn't just compromised. It was the conspiracy. The chief strategist has revealed himself, and in doing so, has painted a target on your back, brighter and more urgent than any before. The conspirators' smile, a thin crescent of malevolence, still seemed to hang in the air, a phantom chill against your skin. The words, unfortunate, echoed, each syllable a stone dropped into the well of your memory, sinking, finding purchase in the dark. You stand in the penthouse boardroom, the city lights below a glittering tapestry of indifference, each tiny spark a distant life unaware of the venom just spilled. The polished mahogany table, vast and reflective, now mirrored only the grim set of your jaw, the sudden tremor in your hand. The room, usually a testament to sterile power, now felt like a gilded cage. The air, conditioned to perfection, suddenly felt heavy, thick with unspoken horrors. You turned from the empty space where the betrayer stood, your gaze sweeping across the panoramic windows. The city sprawled, a sprawling beast, and somewhere within its labyrinth, a new sacrifice was being prepared. Your phone, clutched in a white-knuckled grip, vibrated against your palm. The caller ID glowed, a name you hadn't expected, a connection from your fractured past. Only this time, it's... The words tumbled out, disjointed, urgent. Details of a sudden disappearance, a specific individual, an abrupt change in routine. The location given, a secluded estate miles beyond the city's edge, sent a jolt through you. And not just any victim. This individual, a figure of significant public influence, possessed a rare combination of intellect and charisma, a vibrant energy that now, in retrospect, clicked into place with the unfortunate trait the conspirator had so casually referenced. Your mind, a whirlwind of fragmented data, began to coalesce. They were steps, stages in a ghastly progression. The line of reasoning, once obscured by grief and disbelief, now blazed with horrifying clarity. It wasn't about bloodlust or simple power. The victims, chosen for their inherent vitality, their unique resonance, were not merely killed. Their essence, their very life force, was being siphoned, distilled, to prolong the lives and influence of a select few. An insidious alchemy, cloaked in ritual, feeding the insatiable hunger of a secret society. These powerful figures weren't just manipulating the city, they were literally feeding on its brightest. The caller's voice continued, a frantic stream of information. They moved quickly. The ticking clock, a relentless hammer against the fragile wall of your resolve, began its brutal rhythm. The next target was clear, the timeline devastatingly short. This wasn't just another murder. It was the culmination, perhaps the final, most potent act of their horrifying ritual. And you, a disgraced detective clinging to the frayed threads of a forgotten case, were the only one who saw the monstrous tapestry for what it was. You gripped the phone, your knuckles stark white. This wasn't merely about justice anymore. It was about severing the root of a cancer that had festered for generations, about reclaiming the lives stolen, the futures devoured. Where exactly? You demand, your voice sharper now, stripped of its earlier tremor, infused with a dangerous resolve. You needed coordinates, access codes, anything that could tear open the velvet curtain shrouding their depravity. The opulent boardroom, a symbol of their power, would become the launch pad for their undoing. You would bring the city's glittering indifference crashing down. The hunt, a desperate final sprint, had begun. The sterile hum of the penthouse boardroom feels like a betrayal. Your hand, tight on the receiver, presses the cold plastic against your ear. The voice on the other end, strained and breathless, plunged you into a fresh wave of dread. Marcus, you need to hear this. The location given, a name whispered in the static, solidifies the fear into a glacial certainty. They have another. You stare at the polished mahogany table, its surface reflecting the city lights like scattered diamonds. This room, a monument to corporate power, now feels like a cage. The weight of the phone in your palm is immense, a leaden anchor in a churning sea. The urgency coils in your gut, a living thing. Your exit is a blur of purpose. The elevator descends, a silver coffin carrying you away from the heights of gilded deception. The city streets swallow you whole, a river of sound and light. The taxi becomes a capsule of kinetic energy, each turn of the wheel an acceleration towards the precipice. The named location, an old industrial complex bordering the forgotten docks, pulses in your mind. This is where the threads converge, where the old wounds will finally be laid bare. The complex looms under a bruised sky, its brickwork a skeletal gray against the encroaching twilight. Rust weeps from every seam of corrugated iron, painting the concrete in ochre streaks. You move like a shadow, hugging the perimeter, your breath a shallow rasp in the cold air. The air itself feels thick, heavy with unspoken things. Through a broken window, a faint flickering light beckons. You find an ingress, a gap in a chain-link fence, and slip through. The interior is a labyrinth of forgotten machinery, hulking forms draped in dust and cobwebs, like ancient beasts awaiting a forgotten master. The light grows stronger, accompanied by a low rhythmic chanting. You move towards the sound, each step deliberate, a hunter stalking its prey. The chanting intensifies, becoming a guttural pulse. Then, through a gap in a wall of stacked crates, you see it. The clearing is illuminated by the sickly glow of a dozen torches, their flames dancing like malevolent spirits. In the center, a makeshift altar of rough-hewn stone stained a deep, unsettling crimson. The air is thick with the scent of old blood and something acrid, burning. And there, bound to the altar, is the individual from the phone call. Again. Your gaze sweeps over the robed figures, seeking recognition. One steps forward, taller than the rest, his robe a richer, deeper black. As he raises his hands, a glint of gold catches the torchlight. A signet ring, familiar from the periphery of old investigations. The magnate. His voice, when it joins the chant, is a low, resonant baritone, a voice accustomed to command. Beside him, a figure of slighter build, whose stance you recognize from countless council meetings. The council member. And then, a third, whose academic stoop and precise gestures are unmistakable, even beneath the hood. The scholar. The architects of your downfall, the puppeteers of this macabre theater, standing openly, bathed in the lurid light of their own depravity. A sharp metallic glint flashes in the magnate's hand, a ceremonial blade, long and wickedly sharp. There is no more time for observation, no more room for hesitation. Now. The chanting falters, then dies. They are not merely cultists, they are trained, ready. A heavy blow catches you from behind, sending you sprawling. The impact jars your teeth, the taste of dust and copper blooming in your mouth. You roll, pushing yourself up, your eyes fixed on the altar. A robed figure intercepts you, a blur of motion, but you drive a shoulder into his midsection, hearing the sharp expulsion of air as he stumbles back. Another swings a heavy, blunt object, narrowly missing your head. The fight is brutal, unrefined, a desperate scramble for survival against overwhelming odds. Amidst the chaos, your gaze snags on a detail. On the altar, beneath the bound individual, etched into the stone, is a symbol. Not the crude markings you'd seen at earlier crime scenes, but the true emblem, the one you'd glimpsed in fragmented ancient texts. It's a spiraling knot, interlocking lines forming an infinite loop, with a single, crucial break in its continuity. A deliberate, almost imperceptible fissure. And at the center of that fissure, a tiny, almost invisible etching of a single withered oak leaf. The mark of the founding families, the secret seal of the original architects. It's the final damning piece, connecting every murder, every disappearance, back to the city's very foundation, to the lineage of those who now stand before you. A searing pain explodes in your side, a sudden white-hot agony. You stumble, vision blurring, gasping for air as a sharp impact drives the breath from your lungs. You fall to one knee, a wave of nausea washing over you, but your eyes remain locked on the altar, on the rising blade. The magnate's face is a mask of triumphant fanaticism. The ritual is almost complete. You have come too far, sacrificed too much, to let it end here. The burning in your side is a dull throb against the roaring fury in your ears. The air crackles with the stench of ozone and spilled blood. A robed figure lies crumpled against the mahogany table, its polished surface now marred with a crimson stain. The emergency call crackles through the penthouse boardroom speakers. Security breach. Initiate lockdown. Repeat. You ignore it, adrenaline coursing, a white-hot tide washing away the years of regret and self-imposed exile. This opulent space, reeking of power and corruption, is the stage for your final act. The remaining figures circle, their faces obscured by the deep cowls. You recognize the precise economical movements of the cult leader, even without seeing his face. He raises a hand, and the others hesitate. Marcus Thorne, the cult leader says, his voice a low, resonant hum that seems to vibrate in your bones. You were always a loose end, a stain we hoped would fade. Fading isn't my strong suit, you rasp, tasting blood. Your ribs scream with each breath. He chuckles, a dry, humorless sound. You cannot stop what is coming. The harvest is inevitable. Then I'll make sure you're the first crop to rot. You spit back, shifting your weight, trying to anticipate his move. He nods to one of the figures. The figure lunges, a silver blade flashing in the dim light. You sidestep, grabbing his wrist, twisting until you hear the sickening crack of bone. The cult leader doesn't flinch. You delay the inevitable. You expect a weapon, a trick, anything. But he simply stands there, radiating an unnerving calm. Do you know why they chose you, Marcus? He asks, his voice soft, almost conversational. Why your cold case haunted you so? It wasn't random. You clench your fists, the silence stretching, punctuated only by the distant sirens growing louder. They saw your darkness. The cult leader continues, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Your capacity for violence. They wanted you to join us, to embrace the power. The words hit you like a physical blow. The faces of the victims, the years of torment, the gnawing guilt. All a carefully orchestrated manipulation? Lies, you growl, but the seed of doubt has been planted. Is it? We simply nudged you along the path. He extends a hand, palm open, an invitation. Join us, Marcus. Together we can reshape the world. The sirens wail, closer now. The emergency call repeats its frantic warning. You stare at his outstretched hand, the weight of his words crushing you. Is he telling the truth? Were you a pawn all along? A weapon aimed at yourself? You look around at the opulent boardroom, the symbol of everything you despise. The blood, the fear, the broken bodies. And then you look at your own hands, stained crimson, trembling with rage. You spit on his hand. They move in unison, a silent, deadly ballet. You fight with a ferocity born of desperation and self-loathing. You are a whirlwind of fists and fury, fueled by years of bottled-up rage. The police burst through the doors, weapons drawn. The cult leader is gone. You stand there, panting, covered in blood, surrounded by chaos. The detective stares at you, his face a mask of shock and disgust. Marcus Thorne, he says, his voice tight with disbelief. You is under arrest. You don't resist. As they lead you away, you look back at the boardroom, at the carnage you have wrought. The harvest has been averted for now, but the seeds of doubt remain, planted deep within your soul. Later, in a sterile interrogation room, the detective slides a file across the table. It was there all along, hidden in plain sight. He points to a seemingly innocuous detail in an old crime scene photo. A faint etching on a window pane, a symbol you had dismissed as graffiti. It's the cult's mark, the detective says. They were involved from the beginning. They used that girl as bait. You were a pawn, a tool, a weapon, and you had played your part perfectly. Justice has been served, but at what cost? You are a broken man, haunted by the ghosts of the past and the demons of the present. Your future stretches before you. A long, uncertain road paved with regret and remorse. The emergency call fades into white noise.